Hey everybody, Matt Avery here, coming back again with another Timer Tip Tuesday. Today we're going to be going over some triathlon and multi-sport in general best practices. Spring is a little bit behind us and summer's on its way, so we're starting to get back into triathlon scoring coming up fairly soon. Some of you have already started already. Today's session is going to be just a quick touch base on the different features we have for triathlon and multi-sport and things to keep in mind as you're setting up your events. If you're new to race day scoring, this will be a very helpful starter for triathlons and multi-sport. We're not going to go too deep into very specific setups or use cases. If you do have a question about how you would best set up a particular event you have, or if you have a question about oddball scenario that you'd like us to consider, feel free to reach out or send us a support ticket. We're always happy to walk you through a specific set of questions that you have via support. And again, if you're not familiar with how we do these, we have a little questions panel on the right using the GoToWebinar, and you can use that to type in any questions that you have as we're going through today's session. It will be recorded, and we're going to post it up on our YouTube after the fact. So if you want to come back and watch it later, you can, or share it with your team or a friend or whatever, you can do that. We'll try to respond to any of those questions that you have. I have Soren and James in the back end. They'll be bringing them up when I have time to take some questions if they're relevant to everyone. All right, let's get started. So again, thanks for joining us. Today we're going to be going into best practices on triathlons and multisport. So let's jump right in. Okay, so what we're going to do is do about 5 different topics today. We're going to talk about the anatomy of a course. This is just kind of going over the setup and layout of how all of the different parts of race day scoring fit together, in particular as it pertains to triathlon or multi-sport setup. Then we're going to go into the different start time options that race day scoring has, because triathlons will typically have, they'll use corral starts, and you want to understand how this works. You want to understand how you can assign people to corrals, especially in triathlons. It's pretty important to get that right. Next, we're going to talk about relay team scoring. Most triathlons or multi-sport events have a relay component, so we're just going to talk through the best practices for that, how you want to make sure that the registration is set up, and things to consider when you're building reports, whether or not you want your team types combined or separated, and we'll go through all of that. Next, we're going to talk through top finisher categories. A very common scenario for multi-sport events is having these special top finisher categories that are based on a custom question response. Like you'll have, are you a Clydesdale or Athena question, and we'll show you how to do that. And then finally, I'm going to walk you through some common report customizations that I suggest for triathlons and multi-sports to make things a little bit more easily readable, especially if you have a lot of splits, to make things just a little bit more digestible when you are printing things out or publishing them online. Okay, so let's get started. Anatomy of a course. So as everyone knows, race day scoring is very flexible. Allows you to set things up in a number of different ways, and especially in regards to how timing locations and streams and segments are all pieced together. So this first section is going to be an overview that applies to all sorts of events, but in particular, it's important to understand it when you're setting up multi-sport events. So as many of you already know, streams are kind of the starting point of race day scoring. It's how we get data from a reader or a file. And basically, a stream is just, you can think of it literally as a stream. It's just a number, or a stream of bibs and times that is being sent to us, and we can take them and put them into different timing locations and filter them out there. So in the end, they all just create a list of reads for race day scoring to assign to a timing location and then filter for scoring purposes. So typically for a triathlon, you might have a bike in out reader, a main and a backup, and you might have a run in out and a run in out main backup as well. And then typically you'll have, it depends on what type of system you're using, whether or not you're using a main and a backup, but a lot of times you'll see a about either three or 6, depending on if you're using mains or backups. But each of these streams typically represents a reader out at your course points. So what you would see is a grouping of these streams together in a single location. Now, every single chip system out there is different. Some you may just have one stream. Others you might have multiple streams in a location. But for this example, I'll say that I have a system that I use a main and a backup for each location. Not always the case, but just for demonstration purposes, I'll use 2 here. So timing locations are a way to group together multiple streams in the same physical area. They also allow you to filter out reads that occur outside of some time range you provide. So you might have like your finish line, you know that the earliest finisher across all of the events in your race is not going to get to the finish line before 12 p.m. So you would set your timing location, start considering finish times after time filter to 12 p.m. And then all of the reads before 12 p.m. are going to be ignored. And they'll say that they are ignored because of a time filter. In addition to this, they also determine how we select reads from a stream that's connected to this timing location. So if I have streams S1 and S2 connected to bike in and out, I have set this up as a finish or split time location. What that means is that it's always going to pick the first time seen for anybody who crosses that finish or that location. So within both the S1 and S2 streams, I want to select the very first time because that's the best one in this case. If it were a start finish, then the first occurrence, I would pick the last time seen. And then if you're using a finish or a split type, you also have the option to say that this location can accept up to X number of occurrences. So what you'll commonly see for a triathlon, and I'll show it in the next screen here, is that they come into the swim in, run out reader, they go through transition, they hit the bike in, bike out reader, and they go out on a bike course and they come back and hit that same reader again. So that reader, we want to take both of those occurrences, the first occurrence, the first time they cross it, and the second occurrence, or the second time they cross it. And then we're going to build out some times from those 2 reads, because we know the bike starts when they leave transition and it finishes when they re-enter at that same location. So if you have a finish or split time location, it allows you to say, I want to consider up to X number of occurrences at this location, and you can use those down the road to build out your times. Okay, so finally, we now are into segments. Segments are like the elapsed time between 2 reads at 2 given timing location occurrences. So you can build these segments from any combination of timing location and occurrence number. So in this case, my transition 1 was, this might be actually more appropriate to be transition 2 now that I look at it. The second time they come into the bike in out reader, and the second time that they go out the run in out reader for a duathlon, they'll say, would be their transition 2 in this case. But basically it's saying, give me the time between these 2 reads, and you have to define each read as what location was it and which time did they hit that location. By default, we build just an entire race segment that is going from either a clock start or a chip start to the finish location that you have set up on your scored event. And then you can add any number of these segments that you want. One thing you have to keep in mind is that you don't have to build segments for all of the entire course. So for example, maybe you have a triathlon where you don't care about the transition times. You don't even want to show them in reports. You don't have to build them just so that they're there. I know in Race Director, you would have to actually build out each and every single segment within a course. Otherwise, it just wouldn't work. So you could, if you wanted to, just add the swim, the bike, and the run and not report transitions if that's what you want. I think most people still do transitions, but just it's good to know as you're learning the system. And most importantly, we have a restriction that all segments that end at the same location and occurrence they must have the same cumulative distance. This is actually wrong here. It should say cumulative. So basically what that means is that like your final segment has to finish at the same distance as your entire race segment. So if the whole race is 10.5 miles, you have to make sure that the cumulative distance, the total distance at the very end of your last segment of the race is the same distance. So if you ever get a warning that says, cumulative distance is incorrect or doesn't match your entire race segment, it's probably because your final segment doesn't have the right cumulative distance in it. So this is just a little drawing of a demonstration of what a triathlon course might look like. The different colored lines are the different segments, and the black lines there are the different readers or timing locations. So you have your swim that comes, it starts at the very start of the race, it finishes at this this location right here on the right. They go out and through transition, they hit the bike start finish reader, they go out in the bike course, come back around, finish at that same one, and then they go back out the swim in, run out reader, and then eventually they come back through the run finish. So on the right, I have written out and described all the different timing locations and occurrences that would define these segments. So the swim is from the start to the swim in, run out occurrence 1. T1 is from swim in, run out occurrence 1 to bike start finish occurrence 1. Then bike is the bike reader occurrence 1 to occurrence 2. T2 is occurrence 2 to occurrence 2 from the bike to the swim. And the final one is the swim in, run out occurrence 2 to the finish occurrence 1. So this can get a little bit confusing if you're not used to setting it up. Once you build out your first one, it makes a little bit more sense, but this is just a good thing to keep in mind as you're building this out. These segments are just basically telling us, I want to make a time and I need to tell the system how they are defined. So not all triathlons are set up like this. Some have separate, completely different readers for the entrance and exit of each of the different legs. So this is the most common one that I see. Yours might be different. Again, if you ever have any questions about best practices or recommendations for your particular event, if you have a different course or you have laps on your bike or there's other things going on, feel free to reach out and we'll help you out get through your setup. So this is a common example of what a typical triathlon might look like in the segments area. On the left, you'll see this little, the green menu highlighted here is it's like a little route planner. That is the segments panel. You can come in here and this is one that's already built for you. What's nice is it will show you here right at the front end the different or the definitions. So the swim is the transition in occurrence 1 to transition out occurrence 1, so on and so forth. You can open up the panels to view them. When you first come into a race, you would just click add segment in the top right there to get started in building them. So just an example of what this would look like for a swim. One thing of note, you don't have to add these for every single event you have. A lot of times you have many different events in triathlon and with similar kind of setups. So you can copy segments from one event to another. If you do this, you probably will have to make some adjustments. If you're copying from a triathlon to a duathlon, for example, you want to make sure you adjust the names so that you have run instead of swim, so that the distances are correct, and so on and so forth. One thing I wanted to mention on this last screen before I left, the difference between segment distance and cumulative distance is basically segment distance is how long is just this segment. So the bike might be a 10-mile bike, but when they finish the bike, they're probably 13 miles into the course or something. I'm making up numbers, but the point is that number of the distance of how far they are through the entire course is the cumulative distance, whereas the distance of just the segment that they last completed, that would be their segment distance. You can set the pace type to be different in here. You want to show bike in miles per hour, you want to show run in minutes per mile or whatever. Just a note, the swim pace we don't support, RunSignup doesn't support the odd paces that swim usually wants to use, like minutes per 100 yards or one of the other ones. So if you do use one of those different swim paces, the pace won't show on RunSignup. It'll show up in RaceDay scoring, but just a thing to keep in mind. All right, and this is just showing you how you would copy from one segment to many others. And then some newer features that I wanted to touch on before we left the segment setup area. So this is really helpful. It's a new one recently added. It's a minimum allowed segment times feature, which basically allows you to say for each and every segment, you can say that no one should do faster than this time. So a bike, I know that in the long course, no one should do faster than 1 hour on the bike course. And what's nice is that, typically for a triathlon, you have the same segment definitions or the same timing location definitions being used by multiple different courses throughout the day. So you've got an Ironman, you got a sprint, you got a duathlon, an aquabike, whatever. They're all using the same locations and readers, but the bike is different. You can't really set up the gap factor on your timing location to cover all of those bases, because it won't be appropriate for all of the different races that you have. If you set it to a minimum time of 30 minutes because that is what your shortest race should be, won't really work for your Ironman triathlon. So you could come in here for your longer course races and say, hey, I know I said 30-minute gap factor between the bike in out reader for the sprint, but I have a longer course that's using that same location. You can come in here and say, for this event, the long course, make sure that no one does less than an hour for the bike. So just a good to know. This is really handy. Another one, you may need to use this, especially helpful if you have situations where you are doing that setup that I described earlier, where they're going into transition and then they're coming back out the opposite direction, where it's basically like an out and back course. This setting allows you to say that you want to make sure that you don't complete earlier segments once this segment has been completed. So what that means is, think of it this way. I came in out of the swim. Let's say I missed my read at the swim in reader. So no occurrence 1 was seen for me. And then I get an occurrence 1 at the bike out reader, the end of transition. And then I get my bike back in, occurrence 2, and then I hit the swim in out reader, of the swim in run out reader. Now the system sees that read and it says that was the first time that you crossed that. That's your swim finish, right? Technically, yeah, based on the definition I set up here, swim, the swim in run out reader occurrence 1 should complete my swim time. But that wouldn't make any sense because it happened way, way later than what it should have. It's going to end up being a negative time because the time that it completed was way, way after it should have been. So what this does is basically says, for what I would do is the second half of the course. So for the bike leg onward, check these boxes, and then it won't allow that earlier segment, my swim segment, to get completed because this bike leg is already done. So it's conditional. It's saying, hey, you've already got a bike time. You can't complete the earlier swim any longer because that wouldn't be valid. So what that does is basically allows you to not have these weird, odd negative times. It'll just show a blank in the swim, and you'll need to figure out what, when they finish and insert that read manually, but at least it won't show a negative time for you. So if you end up at a situation at a race where you're missing a whole bunch of reads for whatever reason, reader goes down or your chips are all wet or whatever, something happened, this could help you and make your results look a little bit cleaner. Okay, so I'm going to jump into the start time options now. Were there any questions that we should bring up from the back end here?
Nope, we're good on that. Maybe touch on why you have 0 for the transition distance.
Yeah, so let's see here. Yeah, so in this case, I'm not sure. This wasn't my actual race. It pulled one from support. I typically set the transition distance itself to be 0, the segment definition distance to be 0, and the cumulative time to be the distance at the end of that transition, which would basically be the same thing as the distance at the end of the swim, because it doesn't really matter. You can put anything you want, but because typically you wouldn't show pace for a transition, so it wouldn't really matter what the segment distance is anyway. So I usually suggest just putting 0 in. Okay, so we're going to talk now about different start time options and dive into corrals a bit. So by default, like any other race and race day scoring, each event has its own separate start time where you would set it up right on the scored events page here. You can set it from the dashboard as we know, or you can just set it up right in scored events. The second option is by corral. So this is important. Basically, the way it works is participants can be assigned to a corral. So this is on their participant record. You can go to their name and then you can navigate to the corral dropdown and you can change their corral. When a participant is assigned to a corral, their event gun time can change. Basically, it can be whatever you have set here. So your wave 1 might start 30 minutes after your initial start, wave 2, so on and so forth. So when someone has a corral assignment and that corral has a start time associated with it, we no longer will look at the event start time for that participant. We're going to say, okay, this person's in a corral, that overrides their event start time, and we'll now consider their corral start time to be their real gunshot. So for corrals, one thing that's really handy for triathlons is we have this feature called member auto assignment. What this does is it opens up a little panel here where you can build out some really powerful conditional rules to automatically assign participants to a corral based on a number of different factors, almost anything you can think of here. So what you do is you would come into corrals, go in to click member auto assignment, and then on the right, you would see this screen here. What this does is allows you to select a certain number or type of participant. So first thing, you have to pick a scored event. So within this group of participants, do you want all of them or just those within the age group, or those in the age group and those in the high school, so on and so forth. Check any that apply. And then you can add any number of different conditions here. These are ANDed together, so you could say I want like all of the age group athletes who are male, who are between 0 and 39. That will grab all of the participants in the age group athletes scored event who are between the ages of 0 and 39 and automatically put them into this corral. And then going forward, any new registrants that are assigned to this event and meet these conditions will automatically get placed into this corral going forward. So you could set this up before registration is closed, and you could start up race day scoring, and it will automatically move people into the corral they should be assigned to based on these different conditions. So most triathlons have like a swim cap color method of doing corrals. They'll have like the pink caps, the blue caps, the green caps. And so what you'll do is just make sure that people who are getting green caps, it might be this condition and then adding another member assignment rule. Sometimes they'll have like, the male elites plus the, well, I guess it'd probably just be the male elites. And then it'd be like the women elite and relay teams. And then like later on might be the aquabikers and the duathletes or something like that. So you can group together these assignment rules. So if you, at the bottom here, it says add another member assignment rule. If you click that, that works as an or. So it'll say everybody who meets these conditions in the first block, or anybody who meets these conditions in the second box. So it allows you to build out some really interesting and cool automatic assignment rules that are vastly superior to anything that you have on RunSignup for registration corral assignment methods. So if you're using race day scoring, it really does open the door to a lot more flexibility for these corral management functions. Now, obviously, you can also manually assign corrals. If you click into a participant record, you'll see it. under the corral field here. You can also import corral assignments from a basic spreadsheet, just going to corrals, import corral assignments, and provide a 2-column spreadsheet that is bib number, I think, and corral name or corral ID. So setting corral start times is very similar to the way you would set up scored event ones. You can do it right from the dashboard or from the corral page, as I said earlier. You can, when you set it up from the, when you start the times from the dashboard, you're given this screen here where you can select which corrals you want to start right now or which corrals you want to manually start from a fixed time. If you know they started 5 minutes ago, you can just manually set them by that time here. You basically check the boxes you want to start and then click start now, or check the boxes you want to start and then enter the time that they did start and do it there. So kind of depends on your workflow. I typically just put things in right into the scored events and corrals page. Some people prefer using the start now button. And then finally, the third option for start times is chip times. So it's not really a third, it's kind of a, it's an additional thing, because whether you're doing, whether you have a gunshot time from your scored event or you have a gunshot time from your corral, you can also have a chip start time. So the way that chip times work with RaceDay scoring is by default, we always ignore any chip start times that happen before the assigned gun time for this participant. And that takes into account your corral assignment. So basically, we make sure that we don't consider any start times that are before my event start time, or if I'm on a part of a corral, my corral start time. Showing here just what it looks like in the segment setup when you are doing a gunshot triathlon where you aren't doing a chip start. You would see for the entire race segment, based on your scored event setup, that the beginning time for the first segment and the entire race segment are both the event or corral start time. Just reinforcing the idea that, you know, if you're assigned to a corral, your gun time is going to be different because you assigned your person to this corral, and this corral has a start time. Okay, it's like no other questions, so I'll keep moving on. I'm going to talk a bit about relay teams now. So as I said before, relay teams are a critical part of most triathlons. They're very standard affair. Relay teams are different from aggregate, which is like your standard team scoring, like a cross-country style or a corporate cup style, where everybody does the full length of the course and then their points or their times are added up. Relay is every member of a team is only doing a portion of the entire course. I'm doing the swim, James is doing the bike, Soren is doing the run. Something to think about, if the race that you are scoring is using RunSignup, you really have to make sure ahead of time that the group team setup on RunSignup is set up in a standard way that is supported by RaceDay scoring. The single most important thing, if you are scoring a race with RaceDay scoring and you're using RunSignup for registration, you must have a separate registration event for relay teams. It's not common these days, but every once in a while, I'll have a request where someone says, hey, I've got this race that wants us to time them. They have 2 events, a triathlon and a duathlon. And then they have like all of the Clydesdale Athenas and all the relay team definitions as custom questions. For the relay teams, that's really not going to work. You need to have a separate registration category for your relays because you can't do within one scored event in RaceDay scoring, some of the people scored as a relay and other people scored as an individual. It's just not possible. So you'll need to make sure that you have a separate registration event category for those relays. The next thing that we really suggest, it does kind of depend on what you need to do, but if you are looking for the requirements from the race director about what their awards categories are going to look like, and they mention that they are relay teams, and they want to award the top male teams, the top all-female teams, and the top co-ed teams, they need to make sure that they have this set up on the back end. In RunSignup, there's the race group types. You would want 3 group types so that when a relay team comes in to register, they have to tell the system, my team is going to be all male, or my team is going to be co-ed. So that definition has to happen as they register, and this is what the setup would look like. Basically, you would have your sprint triathlon relay registration event selected for each of these group types, and then when the groups get created, we know, the team 1 is a co-ed, team 2 is female, and team 3 is male. So you have to make sure that this is set up if you need to break out your categories. It's not possible to like filter things out later for if you didn't have these group types set up in advance. So if you wind up in a situation where you find out week of they want to do relay scoring and don't have this set up, you're just going to have to do some manual moving around, changing groups to a new group type that you added. So you really want to try and catch this as fast as you can to make sure that it's set up right. Okay, so once you get everything all set up in a RunSignup, you make sure it looks good. What you have to do, this is a commonly missed thing, you have to make sure that you come into the scored event. After saving scored events the first time, you'll be able to click this team scoring button. If you don't save scored events before, like the first time you set it up, you won't be able to click the button. So just make sure you save this page and then you click the button. And then you'll see this screen here where you can come in and tell the system what type of teams you're going to be scoring for this scored event. So for triathlon, again, typically going to be a relay team. So just select relay from the team scoring type. And then the setting here to determine whether team members have a common bib number. You can either say yes or no. So the common bib number thing is, it's a question that comes up pretty frequently. Basically, a lot of questions we'll get is like, hey, how do I assign bib numbers? Should I assign it to the individuals on the team? Should I assign it to the team itself? RunSignup has a team bib number field. You can do either. If obviously, if they have common bib numbers, you have the option to assign all the individuals on each of the teams the same bib number as the rest of their team, or you could assign one bib to the whole team. It'll work the same for race day scoring. So if James, Soren, and myself are on a team and our team bib number is 1, and the bib number is put onto the team record, it'll work the exact same way as if I had assigned bib 1 to myself, James, and Soren. So just good to know we support both methods, and you can try it out if you want to play around with the data. I always like to double check and just enter in some manual fake bib assignments, manually record some raw reads, see what it looks like. Basically, we take the read data and we associate it all the way up to the team based on the membership, so who's on it, and then whether or not there's a match on the individual bibs. And if not, we look at the team and say, oh, there's a match on the team. So we support both methods there. Now, obviously, if you have different bibs for each of the team members, you can't assign 3 different bibs to the same team, so you would assign those all at the individual level, and you wouldn't need a team bib assignment. You could also do both. If you have the same bib number, you could assign the team and the individual the same bib number. Nothing's going to go wrong there either. Okay, the final thing about team types.
Avery, sorry, can we just hesitate for a second?
Sure.
And can you bring up, do you have scoring running on your machine?
Yeah.
With the triathlon in it? Just this whole thing with team types, we call them team types. Over at RunSignup, it's all group types. And as Avery said, in a perfect world, everything's going to be set up in registration the way that you want to score, but things aren't always a perfect world for timers. And so this concept, and he's trying to explain here, is that we have these things called team types. And team types are really whether or not you want to score them head to head based on that thing. And so in scoring, you're going to have to set up different team types if you really want to focus and say that this is going to be scored as a group of people head to head, and I'm going to categorize it that way. And so that would be the team type. So he's been going through these different gender categories. So you might have female being scored separate from co-ed being separate from male, all male teams. But at the end of the day, can you just explain a little bit about what you were talking about in terms of those team types and whether or not they exist at RunSignup, and then also the questions are really about gender and how typically people handle gender with team types.
Yeah, so I was going to actually describe it in this slide here. So if basically we know when you set up a scored event that that event is associated with any number of different team types, when you add reports for it, you're going to be basically asked, hey, what type of teams do you want included in this report? So if you have multiple, you could customize and say, for this report, I just want to show the male relay teams. For this report, I want to show just the female relay teams. And for that report, I just want to show the co-ed relay teams. So the gender stuff usually doesn't come into play. It's usually just a kind of a custom thing. You can think of it that way. Like they're just called male relay, and there's usually not a restriction. Like I typically don't see people actually restricting it on RunSignup, but some may, where they require everyone to be a male if they join the male relay team. If that's what you're asking, I'm not quite sure. But let's look in here.
And then the other thing is talk about the fact that sometimes you have to just set things up in RaceDay scoring. So you can set up the team types here, even though the race director's already done it. You can absolutely just set it all up in scoring the way you need to score it, and then you can use, as this is what Avery was talking about, some manipulation to get people into those team types, and you can do it all on the scoring side if needed.
Yeah. So what I usually see is this: like they have male, female relay, and then co-ed relay. And by default, we just create, when you save scored events for that scored event, it basically will just create one single team report for you that has all those categories. You'll see it up at the top here. It'll show team types, male relay, female relay, co-ed. If you don't want all of them together, you would just create a new report that's filtered based on whatever team type you want in this. And if you select multiple, it combines them. If you select one, it's just that one. So most of the time what I see is there's one scored event called team relay or relay teams, and then there are 3 group types within that, and then the timers usually just have to come in and add manually each of those separate reports for the subcategories if they want them broken out, which they usually do. So to do that, you would just come into your reports area, click build report. You'd select first the events to include, and then you would click the team summary report section. So this is going to add a single block in your report. And then it's going to ask you what team types do you want to include in this report section. So one or many, and then you would just select male or female or co-ed. And then you would see, once you're done, each of those there. So you would just have a co-ed, a male, and a female. You can set up result publishing for each of them separately so that at RunSignup it'll show as a separate result set for each of those team types. So let me see if there is anything else I didn't quite answer from Sean's question here. If team try and do team as team types, but allow them to select male, female, co-ed in each of those team to 2 types. Best practice has 6 team types as opposed to the 2. I feel like, so what Sean is saying is that he has the gender restrictions, and I can't recall if we also break those out automatically into separate team types. Sean, if you have a question, shoot us.
Yes, we do. Yeah, so if the team restrictions are set up at RunSignup registration, when it comes down, we will create different team types based upon those different restrictions.
Gender restrictions, yeah. That's what I thought. So you should see, Sean, in your team types area in RaceDay scoring, that it's automatically broken out for you. Like it will have, if you had a try team, and within that you had gender restriction options, like those checkboxes to select male, female, co-ed, it should show try team co-ed, try team male, try team female, and then do team male, whatever. So you should see each of those available in RaceDay scoring. So just double check it, go to participants, teams, and then team types, and you should see a list of all the team types, and it'll say like the actual reg group type ID will be the same for all those, but they'll be broken out for scoring purposes. Okay, I think we got all the questions there. I'm going to move on to top finisher categories. Top finishers are very obviously common, but with triathlons, things are a little bit different because most or a lot of triathlons like to do a Clydesdale Athena award category. So what people will typically do is set up a select menu custom question on RunSignup that is asking each participant what category they want to be scored in. So you'll see something like this in the back end of RunSignup. You'll have a select menu. Don't use checkbox. It won't work, and it doesn't make any sense to use checkboxes because it can't be Athena and Clydesdale. You have to be either or, so it has to be a select menu or a radio button. Select menu makes the most sense, I think. So they'll have these different award categories for each. So, allows participants to select what category they want to be scored in, Clydesdale, age group, or elite. Just obviously make sure that they are, this is not set up as a checkbox. It's really important to make sure that that's not set up that way. And then also make sure that you require a response for each registrant. You want to make sure that each of the participants who's registering in a transaction respond to this question. If you don't select ask each registrant, it's only going to ask the first person who registers for the whole transaction, which usually isn't what you want. So what do you do with that now that you have the data on RunSignup? There's a few questions you have to ask first, but typically what you want to do is include, make sure you include any data that you want from the sync settings area. It's defaulted everything on. You can uncheck ones you don't want, but you'll see that question show up in RaceDay scoring here. And then you can, if you want to, you can change the label from race category to cat or division or whatever you like. That's just a little hint for you. It'll just change the way it's displayed in the reports or whatever. But as long as it's showing here, the data will sync down. So what most people want to do with these categories is set them up as top finisher categories. So you would come into your standard top finisher category settings. You would have your overall, your masters that are standard, and then you could have these custom top finisher categories. This is a very powerful feature in RaceDay scoring. It allows you to say, hey, anybody who meets these conditions, so their race category equals Clydesdale and their age is less than or equal to 39, basically is going to grab anybody who is a Clydesdale and 39 and under and put them into this top finisher category. So most people want to have the Clydesdales in their own completely separate results, and they want everybody who is a Clydesdale to qualify in that band. So they don't want just the top 3 and then everybody else is in the regular race. That wouldn't make sense for a triathlon. It's usually very distinct. Everybody who registers as a Clydesdale is shown in the Clydesdale results. So what most people do is at this section here where it asks how many Clydesdale winners in the sprint triathlon, they set the gender count to some arbitrarily high number, like 99999, so that everybody who meets these conditions will be automatically put into this completely separate band, so that when they go onto RunSignup and they view the results, they're going to be in the main result set, so they'll be listed against everybody else that they are included in the same report as. But in the age groups or divisions dropdown, there will be a way to view just those participants who are Clydesdale male 39 and under. So it's a really nice way to display results in both ways. So everybody who competed over the same course would be in the main result set, and then all of the award subdivisions are available in the age group or division dropdown. So this is really nice. Some things you may want to think about or consider are the band jumping rules. This basically determines whether or not someone should be able to qualify and jump up to a higher band if they meet both conditions. So if somebody was a Clydesdale, they were under 39, should they stay in their Clydesdale category even if they get first overall, or should they qualify for the sprint overall award? It's a question that you want to discuss with the race organizers, because sometimes it's not clear which award they should get. If I'm first overall, should I be placed as a Clydesdale winner, or should I be placed as an overall winner, or maybe both? So you need to make that, you need to think about that. If you want them to jump up and win the overall, you would select all there. If you don't, and you want them to stick in their original band, the lowest priority band, select none. If you want them to qualify for both award categories, select double dip. And by rule is like if you have award values you want to place in there, you can do that, but I'm not going to go in that today. So that's how we suggest doing the custom question type of scoring for most situations. Obviously, this is a little complicated and it's very conditional based on what you're trying to do, what your race directors want, what data you're working with. So if you ever have any questions, reach out to us, submit your help ticket, and we'll get a copy of your setup and just say, hey, I set up my top scoring categories, I added some fake data, and it doesn't look right. I think that this person should have gotten that award and this person should have gotten that award, and we'll tell you, oh, it's because these settings are set up like this, send you some screenshots, tell you to change them, and after an email or two, we should have you set and ready to go for the weekend. Yeah, Steve's asking what's the best way to handle elite or open categories. I think the question that I had, or what I had gone through with the band jumping should cover that. It basically depends on what you want, whether you want elites to be completely separate, if you have race category, if you have elite as a response to race category. So usually they tell me if they select that option, if they don't, when they're eliminated from both open, elite, and age groups too. Where would they go, I guess? They would just be disqualified or not shown results? Yeah, I'm not sure. I guess not. If they're not shown in results and they register for the elites, then I would probably, I feel like I would disqualify. That's what I would tell them. Yeah, that's what makes the most sense to me. Because like if they aren't showing results, that would be a disqualification in my book. Okay. So next we're going to talk about some age group report best practices. This is nice for award ceremonies. Just you don't want to show all of the split data. You only want to show award winners. So some quick tips for age group report customizations. So make sure that you set the award winners properly. If you have these top finisher categories where you are only going 3 deep for overalls and masters, make sure you set that. And in your age groups, if you are doing age groups as actual bands, then make sure you set the number of winners appropriately, 3 deep, 5 deep, whatever it is. And then for the age group reports that we build, we show all people who are in the age groups. Now that may or may not be what you want. You can come into the age group report, open up the filters area and check this box to show award winners only. That is basically going to only show the top 3 per category. So for a nice awards printout, that would be typically what you want to do. The other thing I suggest is getting rid of splits from the printouts, because if you print out the splits for an age group report, you're not going to be able to read it. It's going to be too small. So just, you don't need to show all the split data for your award ceremony. Just, you need to know who got first, second, and third. So I usually remove the splits and check this box to show award winners only if I'm doing an award printout. The other thing you may or may not want to change, at the very bottom of the age group report, there's a way to determine the ordering of the age groups themselves, whether you want to show all the females first, then all the males, or if you want to show all the males, then all the females, or if you want them interspersed. So you want to show the male 20 to 29, then the female 20 to 29, then the male 30 to 39, then the female 30 to 39. This is where you can make those changes. Okay, we are speeding through. We've got one more thing to go through today, I think. Talk about editing the splits display. So by default, when you build a report, when you save scored events and race day scoring, you build a default report for you that has a whole bunch of data in it that you may not want. So for triathlons, I typically suggest a few customizations to the default reports that are built to look a little bit cleaner and be a little bit more readable, especially if you're printing. And even just looking at it on a computer, it can get really, really long with all of the additional split data that's included by default. So these are some best practices that you'll want to know about. Just come into the report, go to edit, open up the edit columns panel here. There's a little pencil icon for each of those column headers. Most columns, fields in the system, all you can do here is like change the name of the field or hide it in the results online. But splits is a special field because it is it has subfields within it. So the splits is basically gonna plug in all the segment data that you have for all of the segments you have in this event. So if you click this pencil icon, it brings you to a new screen where you are able to determine what sub-columns show within that splits column. You can customize a few things, a column alignment. Most importantly, there are these checkboxes to determine which sub-columns you want to hide. So there are cumulative times and there are segment times for segments. Cumulative times are the total time from the very start of the race to the end of this segment. Segment times are basically the time from the start of the segment to the end of the segment. So for a triathlon, think of it this way. A transition, you probably want to show 30 seconds. You probably don't want to show 10 minutes and 30 seconds because that doesn't make any sense for a triathlon, whereas it would for the Boston Marathon. You want to show what my half marathon time was, not the time it was from my 5K split point to my half. You want to show like my half marathon time. But in this case, you want to probably hide all of the cumulative times, so you just show your segment times. So that's usually what I suggest. That would take a report that looks like this. I didn't have any actual split data in here, but the columns are what I'm trying to show off. So this is what a default report would look like for an Olympic. Swim, T1 bike, T1, T2 and run, but it shows cumulative time, cumulative pace, time, pace for each and every single segment. That's just a ton of data that you probably don't need to see. So if you check those boxes and don't show the cumulatives, it looks way cleaner, a lot smaller, a lot more legible and readable. So I highly suggest getting rid of all the cumulative fields for your triathlons. Makes things a lot easier to understand when you're looking at reports. Another thing you can do is hide the pace fields. So for a results printout, they probably don't need to know the pace right away. They're really just looking for their standings, and maybe they don't care on RunSignup about the paces. You could really trim it down if you want to. Typically, I see people just stick with time and pace, but it's up to you. Another thing you can do, which I actually really like for triathlons, we have a completely different splits field that's called splits with place. So instead of showing the cumulative time pace, it will show the actual placement within that segment. So it'll show who had the fastest bike leg. So it'll show their time for the bike leg and then what placement they were for the bike leg alone. I think that's really neat for triathlons. It gives people another data point to look at and brag about to their friends. Hey, I didn't win, but I got the fastest bike. That's pretty cool. So that'll show here on your reports as place. And I think that's everything that I was going to go through today. Was there any questions that we had before we wrap up for today?
No, it's again a really more complicated scenario as we did lap racing recently on a Timer Tip Tuesday. Now again, triathlon with all the different segments and all. It's really great. Can you just bring up the screen and just talk? I know it hit it, but it just, again, for those timers out there that offer a ton of different combinations, like all the different duathlons, swim, bike, just you end up with trying to give a lot of different options to your participants so that you can get them out there moving and doing endurance. And one of the things that we added recently, and he hit on, I just want to make it really clear, is if he goes to segments, now got this capability to really do this minimum allowed time. So it really has changed scoring this summer versus last summer. And now you don't need to set up all these different timing locations for all the different options. So if you're really in the space where you're trying to offer a lot of different options for people to go out and move, now you can just kind of focus in on this setting and use those same segments for all those different combinations that you're putting out there.
Yeah, the big thing that this helped out with was that in the past, timers would set up a set of locations for each and every different start time that they had, because they knew that this one started at 9, but maybe this one started at like 11. what they used to have to do was make sure that all of these accepting start time filters made sense for each of the particular events they had. Now they can use one set of locations, and then they just make sure that these time filters apply for all of the events sharing that location, and they'll be able to filter out and get the data correct based on having your minimum allowed time set properly on each of your segments for each of the events. So it's really helpful if you have a ton of events that are happening throughout the day and you don't want to set up 50 timing locations with making sure that all of these time of days are set correctly, because it becomes a bear if you have like a super long list here and you have to make sure that all of your time of days are correct. It gets really hard to handle. So it definitely has helped out if you are used to building a ton of different locations. I think that was everything. There was one thing that I had thought of, so we have just a minute here, that helps in some very unique scenarios, but hurts in many other ones as well, is this was a new setting that we added, require chip start time. It's a dangerous setting. Don't check it unless you know what you're doing. But there's one thing, and it pertains to triathlons, that I suggest it to be used for, and that is if you're doing pool start triathlons for like kids tries or something like that, where you know everybody's getting a chip read at the pool entrance, they scan their leg right as they get into the pool, and it's like a time trial start. You want to make sure that everyone's chip start is accurate because that's their official start time. There's no concept of a gun start really for pool starts. Everybody, it's like a time trial. Everybody gets their chip start time. What this does is it says, I don't care what happens throughout the course. If you didn't get a chip start, I'm not going to accept anything else for you. The reason this is helpful is pool start triathlons, it's a throughout the day people are starting, and a lot of times they don't control the transition area very well. So people got chips, they're walking around transition areas, and suddenly they're popping up in results because maybe their gun start time was earlier in the day. They aren't starting until later, but the system doesn't know that. So what this does is it prevents any issues with participants getting picked up in transition after their official gun start time until they get a chip start read when they enter into the pool. So it's a really nice feature for time trial starts or pool start triathlons, but it can be super dangerous if you're using it for anything other than that, because it will cause all reads to be ignored for anyone until they get a chip start time. So consider this if you're doing like a time trial or a pool start try, and then if you aren't, you really got to understand what you're doing. Otherwise, you're going to run into a lot of confusion. All right, so wrapping up here, I'm just gonna talk through some upcoming things we have. You don't already know, we are doing a Timers Masters program in Philly, June 11th to 12th. This is gonna be kind of like a symposium just for timers. We're doing some training and sessions. We'll get some nice FaceTime, get to see you, and do all these different things. We'll have a nice morning run. We'll have a lab room with all of our technology we're gonna be showing to you. We're gonna be doing a timer panel discussion. We're going to be asking you for your advice for our company, making sure that we're on the right track, doing what we need to make your events better and for you to grow. So if you're able to join, that'd be amazing to see you. I'll be there myself. I think that is everything for today. So thanks again for joining us. Again, if you do have any questions about a setup that you have, best way to get in touch with us, use this Get Help area, submit a help ticket. We'll get a copy of your race file and we'll be able to help you out. If you want a one-on-one session, it sometimes is really helpful just to talk through a scenario. Feel free to use this book a training session area here. This will it'll set aside a time for myself and Soren to sit with you and talk through your unique scenario that you got going on. Or if you're just getting started and you're a little bit lost and would rather just talk to someone, this is what you want to use. So again, thanks everybody, and we'll talk to you at the next Timer Tip Tuesday. Bye.
Brian said to like and subscribe.